you caught us as we were just sort of gathering ourselves together, getting ready to go on Facebook, and we're here. And it's our second roundtable for talking about creating a positive pathway out of the pandemic for people living with dementia, their families, and their care providers. And today we're going to be talking with a variety of providers of care. These are people who've made a choice. They help people who are helping. They are the helpers. They guide the helpers. They have been in charge of places where people living with dementia live. They are also, some of them, family members. So you don't just get one job when you come into the world of dementia. You have several. And some run companies, and some work in companies, and some work independently. So we're going to first meet all of our guests, and I'm just going to have them introduce themselves and say a bit about themselves, their background, where they come from, what they do. And then I'm going to ask some questions. And we're live, and Corey is live, and we've got some other of our PAC folks in here. So if you want to ask questions, you can ask them, and Corey will filter them in and interrupt us or contribute, as the case may be. So I'm going to start us off by going from me. I'm Teepa Snow, which I assume you know since y'all are here, or if not, I'm Teepa. And I have 40 years of clinical experience in the world of occupational therapy and dementia. And I've done teaching and training and hands-on work, but I was at NA before there was a C. There was no C. You followed somebody around for 3 days, and then you got your assignment, which mostly, unfortunately, at that time was untie them, dry them, and tie them back up. So that didn't appeal to me too much. That's not how I worked. And so I did some other things. But that was certainly my first exposure to people who are hands-on care providers. Was they were told what to do, and yet they knew better things to do, but sometimes they got told what to do, and it wasn't always healthy. But that's my background. And since that time, things have changed dramatically in some ways. And in other ways, I'm not sure we've changed everything that we should have changed. So now I'm going to introduce over Ruth Dennis. So Ruth, tell us a little bit about you. And you'll want to unmute yourself so we can hear you.
Hi, I'm here. I'm Ruth Dennis. I work with Vista Living Care. We're 3 little small assisted livings. 2 are Alzheimer's specific and specialty. 1 is assisted living general, frail elderly and palliative care. We were the first, and so far our company is the only Eden alternative programs in New Mexico. Sierra Vista, which I was a founding member of, started the Eden alternative movement in New Mexico. We do a lot of really neat work with art and pets and music and food and life. I was emailing Corey back and forth and realized that all of our staff, including the owner, does hands-on care. We're all on the floor. We're all, I've done hands-on care with elders for 21 years, residential care in different forms for 32 years, and was a family caregiver to my brother, who passed away in December with Downs and heart failure and cognitive impairment the last few years, for 22 years. So that's kind of my background. Vista has just been this really neat, weird little place in New Mexico. So, and New Mexico officially opened yesterday. So
New Mexico just officially opened its doors up. And so what we're going to do is hear from Ruth about what they've been doing all along and what's happening as of yesterday in just a little bit. So Mary, we're going to have you join us and see if you can get your voice to happen. Because Mary, I'd like you to tell us who you are, where you come from. And so you'll want to get that unmute thing going on there. And Ruth will have you mute up so we don't end up having static in the background. So almost, Mary. down in that left-hand corner. If you go down there and click that little microphone. There you go, you did it. Good job. All right, so tell us about yourself, Mary.
Well, hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Teepa. I'm Mary Rivas, and I've been in the healthcare field for 34 years. My hair gives my age away here. I fell in love with it as a young girl at the age of, believe it or not, 6 years old, in the 60s, watching Emergency. You know, the ambulance, the two paramedics that are in the ambulance that get in all kinds of sorts of predicaments. I pointed at the TV and said, that's what I want to do. And I became an EMT paramedic later in my 20s and gradually worked up to helicopter rescue and a little bit of firefighting training, as well as water rescue with canines, and absolutely loved it. But there was just something missing, you know, there's just that little connection missing. And I thought, what's out there that I could do? And as I was going to college, I got my BA in biology pre-med. And I was born and raised up in Maryland, Virginia, DC area, and now reside in North Carolina. It's like a second home to me. I adore it. But I missed that connection somewhere and realized CNA work is that one-on-one. Especially, yes, there we go. Especially working with dementia, Alzheimer's, patients. They keep your day spiced, I tell you. So I went into group homes, in-home care, nursing, facilities, right, as well as assisted living facilities. Got into a hospital, worked on a med-surg unit, and finally with an agency. And totally love it. I travel now and go from agency to agency, whatever they need. With this COVID-19, you can bet you that a lot of us are doing some traveling wherever we're needed. Cool. And it's a rough going when you see a dementia Alzheimer's patient who has to be told, you cannot come out of in certain words, you cannot come out of your room. You have to wear a mask. How do you say that to them when they're having that issue of understanding that they're battling with their feelings? They've already felt trapped somewhere, and you're adding on to that by giving them more limitations. When you are an Alzheimer's dementia patient, your world is just that, your world. Everyone else lives in it.
So Mary had this really amazing insight from years and years and years that when someone is living with dementia, they're living with dementia. That's where they are. And so trying to get them to understand something like a pandemic and something like wearing masks and something like not going somewhere where they usually go just doesn't make a lot of sense. So Mary, we're going to come back and talk more about the different things you've seen, because you have been in different spaces and different places. And we're also going to talk about what's scary, what's okay, what's the worst of some of this. So now I'm going to switch over here. I'm going to go to Seth, because Seth, we talked on Friday, but Seth, not everybody was with us on Friday. So if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got where you were and are and what you're doing these days. And a little bit about that, if you would. So Mary, we'll have you mute just so we don't get some background noises.
Okay. So my name is Seth Mausovitz, and I originally was an elementary school teacher. I taught elementary school for about 8 years, my first career, and I loved it. And my wife's a teacher also. And we quickly realized it's going to be very difficult to pay some of these bills if we both teach. And that's when I started looking at what could I do, what other careers could I get involved in. And that's when I researched and discovered non-medical in-home care. And so I got involved in that and loved it. I love working with people. I love helping people. People would say to me, Seth, how do you go from working with a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old to an 88-year-old? And I said, nothing's different. They both they both demand respect. And the transition was natural. So I've been involved in home care. I've owned agencies for over 17 years. I currently have one here in Jacksonville, Florida. And noticed a trend and working with CNAs primarily. That's what makes up 95% of our staff. That there's a change going on. There's obviously a shortage of CNAs, and there's also a shortage of what I like to call professional CNAs. And so I worked on a business model and was able to come up with a plan and started a company called CNAs Only, which is a company geared towards empowering CNAs to have better working conditions, which will ultimately translate to a better lifestyle for them, because they are the backbone of the healthcare industry. They do not get the recognition and respect they deserve, nor wages, nor we can go into a lot of other things, but we'll stop right there. So I opened up a local state licensed CNA training school. And we just opened up in December, and the goal there is to help train, equip these CNAs with the best skills possible, with an emphasis on dementia training, which is why I went in the summer of 2018 to Salt Lake City, Utah, and took Teepa's course with her daughter Amanda was teaching that. And then my instructor that I work very closely with was Dawn Wiggins, who I stay in touch with today. She's incredible. She's amazing. And I feel that, I know that the CNAs today, they must have a better feel and understanding for dementia, because every facility they're working in, whether these residents are diagnosed or not diagnosed officially with dementia, they're exhibiting symptoms that these CNAs need these tools and these skills necessary to interact and ultimately help with the quality of life for these individuals. So
you're sort of coming into this from two frames. Or three. One is you are running an agency of service for both in-home, but also residential care support for individuals and families in those residences, in those homes. But you're also really interested in changing the dynamic of training. So people who are more prepared for the work that they're being asked to do with skill and with knowledge and with expertise, to recognize this is, in some ways, for me anyway, a very special practice. And if you don't have the right matchup, it's going to feel like you've been imprisoned versus you've been enabled. And we believe in empowering people to do what they can do the best they can do it. And the only way to do that is to prepare people for the possibility that you're going to be working with somebody whose brain is changing on them and on you on a minute by minute, hour by hour basis. And they can't control that, but you can control you. And so the value and the purpose of what you do really matters, and that you feel pleasure and joy along with the hard work, or it becomes a prison that you're in versus an opportunity that you have.
Right.
So cool.
And just lastly, I want to say my claim to fame is I'm good friends with Mary Daniel. And we all know who Mary Daniel is.
Yeah, so Mary Daniel helped us start this whole big conversation, and
Right.
it's a big conversation.
Yeah, love you, Mary. We're behind you all the way.
Yeah, thanks, Seth. Now, Daphne, you're driving. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come back to you, because I do not want to put somebody who we really value and really think highly of at risk. So we're going to come back to you after you get where you need to be. But I know you're listening in, and I know you want to be part of this conversation. So we're going to come back to you when it feels safe for you. And you let me know, or let Corey know, if that's okay. If you can give me a thumbs up so I know you listened. You got me. Okay, good. Now keep your eyes on the road. All right. Now, Peg, if you are available, if you would join us, we would love to have you here because you have a whole story similar to Mary Reeves' story. Interesting. So tell us a little bit about you and your background coming to the table here.
So my background is, it came to me, not something that it wasn't something I look, how can I explain this? It came to me out of necessity. I didn't know that I would want to work with older adults, especially people living with dementia. It was more out of necessity 20 years ago. And so now it's just my passion is something that I enjoy doing. I'm still working in facilities and communities and working with the staff, the CNAs in the front line, like Seth. And I have to say kudos to you, Seth, because if we don't empower these CNAs and we don't train them the right way, we will not have the quality of care that we're looking for people living with dementia. And too often, and in my experience, we're not getting that training. We rely on online or study packets, or we're not doing the same training that Teepa Snow taught me many years ago. I've also had the privilege to work with Teepa for many years with her company and with another community that we were implementing PAC. And so it was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. And I do value the CNAs, and I value what families are going through. Professionally and personally, have been involved with people living with dementia. I have to say, my brother was just diagnosed with COVID last week. He was moved into an ICU at a large Pittsburgh hospital. So we are that family member that can't go and see him. I haven't seen him since March. Right now he is in a COVID ICU on oxygen, and I think they started Revesidir, and so we're helpless. We can't see him, and we can't do anything about it.
Yikes.
So yes, this journey has taken me many different places.
Yeah, and Beth, and also Peg's mom had dementia.
Oh my gosh, how many times I would call Teepa going, T,
And
what do I do?
And Peg ran a community specialty AL for people living with dementia, a residential program. And then she headed up a CCRC.
A CCRC. We worked at a CCRC with over 400 staff members, getting them trained and holding them accountable to use positive physical approach. I got to tell you, that was 5 years of a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
But, and I think back on that, and what we learned and what we did made such a difference, because when I see those aids, Peg, we need that dementia training back because it went away.
Yeah.
It went all online.
And the other piece for people to know is, Peg, I think you trained as a CNA.
I did. I was a CNA.
So you've been a CNA. Yeah.
Yes, I'm still the best CNA, and I can give the best shower.
Oh, there you go. All right. So Mary and Peg are probably going to have a competition. I don't know if Daphne's going to jump in here too, but people who are the best, they love what they do, and we value what they do. So here's what I'm going to ask each person to do. If you would, tell me some of the greatest triumphs or positives that you've experienced since COVID started. Something you're really proud of that you or your company or you and the agency or you personally have been able to do that made a difference in someone's life. So what have you done that you really feel good about from the role that you're in? So Ruth, I'll come back to you. We'll start back over with you because I'm curious to see what you have to say. And you're muted, so you remember that part. You have to unmute. Peg, you'll want to mute up. I know. Thanks. I'm the gatekeeper of talking.
There are a lot of things that have really blown me away with COVID, and I am unbelievably proud of the team that I'm working with. Caregivers, nurse, owner, directors. They're amazing human beings. One of the things I always think about COVID is sometimes you feel bad for feeling good. I feel really, really good about the fact that we're really doubling in, really sinking ourselves into, in a real soul kind of way, into relationships with elders and families and our community partners. And
So Ruth,
And we've painted a mural, we've planted gardens, one lady learned how to salsa dance. One gentleman can now speak Spanish, who has dementia and traumatic brain injury.
yeah.
You know,
So Ruth, you guys did something different than the norm. And the norm is people were, like Mary described, telling people living with dementia who couldn't comprehend the why of it and the how of it to isolate. And tell us what you guys did in your communities in New Mexico, because I think that's important for folks to hear that you all made a different choice and fought for that choice early on. What'd you do?
Well, what we did, and I'm really, really proud of Blanca and Carol, because they sat down with people from the state and they said, you know, we can try this, but it ain't gonna happen. You know, we can try this, we'll do our best, we'll attempt social distancing, we'll try, but this is their home and we're their family. And this is the stance we're taking. We have been very, very careful with visitors and not having visitors and volunteers. But we've done it in a gentle way. We've started an online support group. We've been sending handmade postcards. We've done window visits and music and art. And
so are people together in the community? I mean, you didn't keep people locked in their rooms or try to isolate them and only see them a short window of time.
No, we didn't. We're very small homes. Our home down in Las Cruces Arbors is 24 people. Mm-hmm. Our home, Sierra Vista in Santa Fe, is 24 people, and Hermosa is 14. So we're very small. I think the structure that we have and kind of the lack of a hierarchy has made a huge difference in how we do things.
Yeah, so Ruth, one of the questions I have for you is, what did you all, as a staff, you work together, and we'll talk about families in a little later, but as a staff, how did you talk with each other about how will we keep one another safe? Because we're working with this very at-risk group, but we have to go home and do things and then come back. How are we going to make agreement with one another, hold one another accountable? How will we get to this new place of creating safety for our safety net for ourselves and each other? What'd y'all do?
A lot of, and I think New Mexico in some ways, while we were having these conversations, what was happening out in the Navajo Nation was right in front of our faces. And it's like, my God, we need to take this really seriously.
Oh, so pause, because Ruth, I think when you say that, you know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. The Navajo Nation is probably an example of one of the highest risk groups from a COVID standpoint that we could run across because of all the factors that make somebody high risk for COVID serious illness. Their gene code and their gene pool, and if only one case happens, that's very, very, very risky for that population. So talk a tiny bit about that, what you were seeing that brought the fear in the reality home.
A friend of a friend sent me a Facebook, and this is actually partly how I got involved with you guys in this discussion. She sent me a post from a friend of hers that said, everybody knows somebody who died. Everybody knows someone has lost somebody. And that was kind of like, wow. And it was not, I know there's the talk about this is a specialty situation. I also have a friend from New York City. So this can happen anywhere. The most sophisticated medical system on the planet, a struggling system. And both of them had the same level of chaos.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we all did as a staff, and we actually started our COVID response 2 or 3 weeks before the state did. And really said, we've got to protect these people. That's our first priority. I have a beautiful young director at Hermosa who started actually as a CNA and then an activities director and then So we've known each other a long time, and she's 27, so I'm like her mother, or her grandmother probably. But she said, I feel responsible not just for the elders and my staff and the family, but for everybody outside. We have caregivers with elderly parents who are family caregivers. We have caregivers with infant children.
Right.
We have staff members I have a staff member who's in treatment for cancer. We have people that we need that are part of our extended family that we need to find a way to protect. And we also need to explain to families what we're doing and why, and to caregivers why it's important.
Open communication was big. Training, was training part of what you did?
Training was a big
This
piece of it.
business and this business and this business.
And, in training, but also really reflecting and doing some of the emotional work around that, which I think one of the things that doesn't get talked enough about in discussions with caregivers, family or CNAs, is the emotional piece, the gut stuff, grief, loss, trauma, burnout, fatigue, what these guys are carrying every day for people. And one of the things that I'm really, really happy with what we've been doing, and it's been a soul searching thing the last couple of years, is how do we go beyond just training? How do we make this part of somebody's DNA, part of somebody's heart? How do we deal with things like trauma, with things like burnout? Our owner's gotten a crash course in what burnout can do in the last few years. And has done really well and responded well to it. But it's, how do we really talk about this heavy stuff?
So what you're bringing up is the other side, but you guys have done some good work on that. So I'm going to come back, because I think
there is a cultural thing too that we need.
There is a cultural thing. And so we do want to talk more, because those different cultures and how we deal with burnout and how we deal with trauma and how we hide it or expose it, or how we react emotionally and what we show people and what we do, and how we can misinterpret one another.
Well, and cop-outs that a lot of companies make, that say it's okay to be mediocre, or it's okay, or this is just the way it is.
Yeah, good enough is okay, or inadequate is okay, because that's just what we can do. And it's like, we need to look at that. So good. Thank you, Ruth. Mary, are you available to unmute and talk a little bit? And Daphne, let us know, give me that sign when you want to talk, because I don't want to leave you out, but I don't want to put you at risk either, because I know you're trying to get somewhere. Go ahead, Mary, and unmute and tell us something there about what you're proud of and sort of some of the things that are, sort of real challenging for you.
Well, some of the things that are challenging is...
Start with the good stuff, Mary. Start with the good stuff. See, that challenging thing always tricks people up. They want to go straight to the puzzle.
The good stuff. She wants the good stuff. Okay. Well, the good stuff for me, and what I'm most proud of, is when, and it very rarely happens, but when that Alzheimer's dementia patient gets that glimmer of themselves and you see it come through very quickly.
You've made that really strong connection, and you can see whoever that is just as whole as they ever were.
Right.
Because you let go of whatever that they aren't themselves thing, and they can let go of it. And the two of you come together in community.
Exactly.
Have you had any really good moments with family where you're helping family by being their person that does some hands-on, but you've been in communication or community with family as well?
Yes.
Tell me about one of those, because I think that's the piece that we need to help people recognize the importance of these connections that we make when someone can't be connected, so that I feel that you get my mom, you get her in such a deep way that I can let go of some of my trauma of not being with her. And I can say, Mary, can you hug her for me? and tell her I love her. And I know that you're doing that. And you can even sometimes show me that. It's like, yeah. So tell me about, if you have one, a family member situation where you feel like you made a difference for family who are dealing with the COVID too.
I had a young, I say young because she was young at heart to me. This little lady was in her heyday, a Mary Kay representative, hair just coiffed perfectly, makeup to the T, and
Pink Cadillac.
yes. She was a force to be reckoned with, and just a delight to be around. From all accounts from her family members, before this Alzheimer and dementia took hold of her, that's the way she was. Their daughter had hard time connecting with the woman she had become because of this. So as you were saying, she become Mary, you connect to mom in a certain way. How are you doing that? Because I get frustrated. I get overwhelmed. I have to change the house because of her now. I have to explain there's COVID out there and she does not understand. And all she knows is she's more trapped. And that's the feeling. They live in their own world, and we just, we're just part of it.
So what did you do to help the daughter? How did you help her?
I kind of talked her through redirecting. A lot of redirecting will get you everywhere. Connect with something that is a common human experience. Music, always music. One of my favorites is if I can't get through to somebody quickly, I'll redirect, change the conversation, calm things down and take it down a notch, which is a lot for me because I'm normally a very hyper person. But
with your background, that doesn't surprise me.
I take it down a notch and I will say to them, do you know that hymn, In the Garden? And immediately you'll see something flicker. And as soon as you start singing it, they may not remember all the words. They kind of mouth along. You're getting through to them. So I told the daughter about that. Find that connection. Don't think of mom the way you had her as a young woman, as a child, as a teenager. Think of her now as she is. It's sad to do that, but you have to. You have to not only understand the change in that Alzheimer's dementia person, you have to make a change in your approach to them, your reaction to them.
So
their dignity
did she do it?
In their core.
Their
dignity stays in their core. The dementia doesn't rob their dignity.
Yeah.
It's how we respond to them. And I think I've heard that somewhere before.
I think you might have heard that from somebody. So Mary, did you get the daughter to try something different?
Yeah, I did. She usually had her mother on certain routines. She thought maybe that was the best thing so as not to upset her mother. And I said, you can do whatever you like with your mom. It's how you approach her with it. The wording. Don't say, I remember this and that. Can we do that with you? Mom, you remember how we did this when I was a kid? She's not going to remember that. Instead, you want to try and say, word it in a different way.
Hey, Mom, could you help me with this? Come here. I want to show you something.
Yeah, I got this great idea. How about we do this?
Cool.
And then guide her gently through it.
Nice.
So.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks. So, Daphne's here. I want to get Daphne. She's here. Come on in, Daphne. Tell us about yourself.
I'm Daphne. I have been a nurse for a lot of years, almost 20.
I love when
to
people
say that
go,
I'm really seasoned. And I have worked everywhere.
So Daphne, is that a memory problem or a counting issue?
Both. It's a little Alzheimer's-ish and it's a little math problem.
And it may be just willful forgetfulness, but who's talking?
Absolutely.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more about Daphne and her long history in nursing.
Well, I originally am from Massachusetts. Yeah. So I've worked in, I didn't start in nursing. I actually started in banking, and I did design, and I had my own business. And then I had a company. And then from there, I traveled. But then I became a nurse, and I've been doing that for a while. And I've worked in trauma. I've worked in med-surg hospitals, rehab facilities, and as of late, nursing homes, and I do hospice.
Ah, cool. So where are you, still in the Boston area, or you're someplace different?
Nope. The greatest change is I am in Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh,
So I
so
had
you
to
was,
adapt to that.
okay, so you do some stuff with Seth.
Yes, I do.
Okay, cool. So tell me a little bit about your experience since COVID. What have you noticed that's good? What have you noticed that you feel good about since COVID started, for yourself or for what you do? For the people
I
you do it with.
have noticed the true dedication that people have to healthcare. They truly, in the midst of everything, want to go to work, and they want to do right, and they will do and work tremendous hours. And they truly do give of themselves, and they try to make every single patient, every resident they come in contact with, they try to touch them just a little bit, just to give them something. Even if it's, a FaceTime with their family, a window visit, or even if it's just someone dropped off clothes and we have a process to go through with clothing and items. But when they deliver it, they make a big deal out of the delivery. So it's not just here, it's dropped off in bags. They make a big deal. If it's a family that says, I need a hug, they will give them everything that they need. So that's one of the major positives.
Yeah, that's huge. And that speaks highly to how you bring people into your agency or company. Tell me a little bit about how you select people. How do you find those people who are skilled, or you help them develop skills, but they have heart and they have spirit, that this is what I do because I love what I do? It's hard work. It will never be easy work, but I find it rewarding. And how do you select those people, Daphne? How do you do that? Because I think that's one of our uh-ohs, is we aren't careful with who we bring into this work situation.
Yeah.
And if anything, I think that's gotten harder with COVID, not
Yeah.
easy. So how do you identify people you think are going to be a good match?
Well, one of the things that we do is we try not to operate out of fear and desperation. So we vet people, and we truly try to get to, like, the first question is, why do you want to do this? And depending on the answer and how they are, but typically we'll start off with why. I mean, how did you get here? And then we try to have them not so much look at this as a job, but look at this like, would you want you to be the type of CNA that takes care of someone's loved one? If you did all of what you do right now, would you want those same skills to be done to your mother, your father, your loved ones? And if that answer is no, then this is not the field for you, because some things you just have to come out of heart to do. You just can't continue to watch and not give of yourself. And a lot of times some people are like, no, I can't do this. They train, they come in, and I can't. Other people, it's just a natural fit because they know that they want to give the type of care they would like to receive.
So what I heard you say, Daphne, and I want to make sure I heard you clearly, is sometimes we do bring people on and we train them and we hope for the best because it looks like it might be a match. Right. And then it turns out it isn't. And it's like, well, it just isn't a good match. I mean, it's not that they're not an okay person. It's not that they don't care. That they care, but it's not a good match for what is needed in this very important work. And it's just giving people permission to go, you know what, it's not a good match. It's like, I appreciate you giving it your best. I mean, that's it, but it doesn't look like we have a match here.
Right.
And acknowledging that and saying it's not for everybody. And I think that's the biggest missing piece, whether it's family or whether it's staff. It's recognizing this work that we're doing for people living with dementia, it is not for everybody. It is not everybody's thing. And to bring somebody forward and they go, get up. I mean, part of their frustration is this is not a good match for them. And we can work on training and we can work on skill, but when we don't see that other human as having a value,
Right.
and the people around them as having value and something to contribute, that makes it really hard.
Right.
So cool. Nice. So Seth, I'll add you into the mix here with what's something that's happened that you feel really proud of. And I know one of them is being Mary's friend and stepping up and doing that. But what else? What else are you proud of since this whole thing started? Because you guys are in a hot spot area for sure.
Just like Daphne said, speaking to our staff and the commitment and dedication, I'm not involved with the facilities very much at all. We have just maybe one or two clients that are in an assisted living that we go and visit. We're, our staff, but everyone else is at home.
So during this COVID thing, was there a time when you cut off service and only were doing telecare?
No.
No.
No, because
So you never did.
Right. The only let's see, our clients or patients, they're all at home, so we can't just cut off care.
That's not true, Seth. People were doing that. People were doing that.
Yeah, we didn't do that.
Okay.
We have what's called a nurse registry model here in Florida, where we have independent contractors. So in essence, the care we provide is patient, client, family driven. They're the ones that are dictating, yes, Teepa is doing a great job with mom. Let's keep her this. We don't want to change anything. They're the ones that are directing the care. So
what kind of education or training have you all engaged in that prepares people for this safety of trying to maintain safety during COVID? Because you guys must be involved in that. And I'm going to ask a similar question, because we must have something we're doing to help people be. You can't just use the public health directives of don't touch your face, wash your hands, wear a mask. I mean, you guys have to be doing something more to help people keep themselves as safe as they can. What do y'all, how have y'all?
It's what the facilities are doing too. It's the PPE, and it's actually up to the family members if they want to temp anybody coming in or out. Just like they have their own little facility, each individual family.
Some people are doing temperature checks. Are people, I mean, in one of our communities, I know people are signing things that I have not been actively exposed. I have self-isolated as much as possible. I mean, some families and some in places are saying, I want you to let me know if this is the case, because we do have to limit until we know that there's a safety measure in place. Yeah. But as long as we all are honest with each other and we're honorable with each other and we're practicing good technique, we're willing to risk with one another because we believe that we each have something to offer one another.
Right, and with some new clients, for a while there, when this hit in the end of March, we didn't get really any new calls for any new clients. Nobody wanted to do anything. Nobody knew what to do. So right. We didn't, I don't want to say we shut down, but we had existing people clients that we were taking care of, but nothing new. So right. One of the calls or one of the questions that, we would get is if when things started back up and we started getting some people needing some care was, has so-and-so been tested? Has so-and-so, with each staff member. And since we work with independent contractors that are already licensed CNAs and vetted, through level 2 background checks and our process, it's up to that individual caregiver if they want to go and get tested right away, or if they've been tested recently, to share that with the families, and then the families can dictate from there, what they want to do. It's right. their option. we're not saying you have to do this, and this.
It's not your role. You're there in a support role, not a
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And I think one of the questions, and I'm going to go to Peg because we haven't heard from Peg yet about, you know, what things that she feels has been good since this pandemic struck. Anything that's been good, because she's been seeing it from both sides, working in community, but also her brother and what's happened with her brother and how that sort of came down. And we'll see whether or not Peg's available, because I know her internet might be a little flaky being up there in the Pittsburgh area. But we'll see if Peg can come back. We'll come back if not. One of the questions that came in too that were of note. One, people are curious about how people are dealing with limits staff retention, because we certainly have heard, and I am very familiar with a couple of communities that they got a positive case and people walked off. They walked away from the community and said, I will not put myself and my family at risk when there's a positive case. And in other places, that's not. It was double down. It was, we've got a plan. Here's how we're going to handle this. We have people who have already had the virus. We have people who don't. We're going to do this isolation for this period of time with this person, and who's going to manage that. And we've had that, and we've had others. So I'm curious as to what you all have been experienced. Ruth, I'm going to start with you here, because I'm betting that you have some stories about what's going on staffing wise and fatigue wise, because you mentioned that it's real. And you're muted, so we want to hear you. So yeah, there you go.
I've gotten spoiled. I usually have somebody tech unmuting me. We've been COVID free, so we haven't had anyone who's tested positive. We're testing really relentlessly and really routinely every staff member every 2 weeks.
So you have access. So you have access to testing on a regular basis.
Yeah, we made a choice. We made a choice as a company to buy it early on and to deal.
And you got access to it. So I think that is two things. You made the choice and then it was available.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
We also, on staff retention, I think it's one of the things that I think being part of Eden, being part of, you know, really looking at our community partnerships and really trying to say a different story about residential has helped.
Yeah.
I do agree with what Daphne was saying about there are people that aren't fits. There are also, one of the things I think that has really, really made a difference for us, not because in some ways what's happened with COVID is just part of what's been a part of our lives, period. And the flexibility that we have around caregivers, staff, what they need with their children, what they need with their families, makes a huge difference. If you need to shift to part-time, if you need to, we can do it. Where instead of talking about should we cut down staffing, we're saying should we make 2 of the part-time jobs full-time?
Right.
You know, we've hired staff and tested them and, you know, set them on non-contact jobs until they get cleared from the testing.
Cool.
But we also, this just kind of innate flexibility.
So,
and we have people who've been there 10 years, 20 years, 21 years.
Because you've built a community where people are community, and they take on a role of supporting family as well as supporting residents. So tell me about, you've opened a couple days, you know, the opening happened in New Mexico. How are you guys reintegrating family into community?
We've never let them go, really. We've been doing the window visits. They're still not touching in New Mexico, but we've been doing kind of really working hard at keeping people connected, sending cards, I'm really blessed to have a big group of staff that are young and tech friendly. So the iPads, the phones,
So when you say no touching, you're saying family's not touching, but you guys are touching.
We're touching.
You're getting in arm's length, you're hugging,
We're hugging, And the
Okay,
caregivers
you're helping people
yeah.
do things, and you're having people out with each other, sitting on couches together, laughing together. Are they wearing masks all the time?
We try.
Uh-huh. Are the residents wearing masks all the time?
No.
No,
I mean,
no,
realistically, no.
no.
But I think, and part of it with staff retention comes to Seth's point about respecting
Yeah,
DNAs and line staff caregivers. And I was getting ready for the panel. I was thinking about our caregivers. And one of our caregivers, young 21, 22, single mom, her goal when she was doing her evaluation was, I want to be a director. I want to own the place. You know, you've got a 20-something-year-old, not CNA, caregiver, line staff caregiver saying, I want his job. And that is awesome. That's what we should be doing with CNAs.
for
You
people
know,
who have that desire, who want to go different directions. So Mary Rivas started off doing crazy stuff and has settled herself down a bit for interactions. So people travel in both directions.
I started out as an artist, and I've kind of come full circle in,
Yeah.
you know, back to being the artist in residence.
Yeah.
The
So-
other person,
So now I'm going to push you a little bit, Ruth. And as I said before we got started, if you don't want to answer, you can say no. I'm wondering how we're going to reintroduce family touching. And I think it's getting close. I'm really
Yeah,
curious
yeah.
what you guys are doing. Who has to get up with whom at the state level to say, here's what the rules are going to be. Here's the training we want to provide. Here's the material we want to provide to make sure that we're as safe as we can be. Because you guys, I think, are going to be some of the early adopters potentially.
I think it's kind of a double or triple-edged sword,
Uh-huh.
which is New Mexico sadly is stuck between Texas and Arizona. You know, which, you know, sky high rates.
Yeah.
Done in a county where Las Cruces is, where Blanca is, they're not opened up yet because the rates are so high in El Paso.
Okay.
So I think it's kind of a mix of love and caution, a mix of love and common sense.
Yeah.
Because I would rather be the facility that was gentle and cautious and slow than the facility that we're losing a caregiver or an elder or a family member or a caregiver's child or their grandchild.
So let me, if you're willing, let me ask, if you had someone who is moving into hospice, is moving into dying, I mean, they are actively moving into dying. Do you have a provision for how the family can connect in that way?
We do, and we have gowned them up, masked them up, gloved them up, and set them in a room with their parent.
Right.
For hours or for all night in one case. And we recently had 2 deaths, non-COVID related,
Right.
just age related.
Right. Right.
And you know, it's a lot of just, and I come at this from a couple different points of view because I was a family caregiver.
Yeah.
I recently lost my
I
brother.
have another really private question that I'm going to ask. When the family members lose their person, is there someone on staff who hugs them?
Yes.
Because I think
They may have a hospital gown on and gloves and
Yeah,
a
yeah,
mask on, but there's
that's the piece that I think people are not recognizing is through this. Families need hugs as much as residents need hugs, and we need hugs.
well,
All
and
humans need to be touched.
And one of the other things that we've done, I think really pretty successfully, is set up an online group like this, where we're meeting once a month and we're talking about this stuff with not just families, but with staff.
Yeah.
And we're getting to know each other as human beings. And we're doing art together online, and
When we talk about emotional training, part of emotional training, I will guarantee you, is in these groups that you're running.
Well, and you know, another piece of the emotional training is this kind of mutual respect. What drew me to this group was actually a comment that was made in the last Facebook Live about English as a second language. And Corey said I had a visceral response. I thought I was being really tactful. I had a visceral response when I heard it. I screamed.
Yeah.
Because there's language and culture different than approach and love and care.
Yep.
And when I have a caregiver over the phone singing happy birthday in Spanish to an elder and her son, that is way beyond language. That's connection.
That's that.
And I have an elder who has, with a traumatic brain injury and vascular dementia, in the year and a half that he's lived with us, tried to teach the caregivers French, which isn't working, but has also learned how café con leche, por favor, mi amor. Dulce, por favor, and he's learned to speak entire sentences with dementia in Spanish. So when I hear things like, this is a problem and the CNAs have a problem, no, the CNAs don't have a problem. The company has a problem.
So when we don't help people recognize what we might be seeing as a difference in rhythm, let's try something different versus it's because you don't speak English. It's like, it's not about—
It's a cop out.
It's let's figure out what's getting in our way and let's figure out how to build the bridge. Because there are ways across this, but first I've got to acknowledge, wow, there's something I'm doing you're not liking. Let me see if I could figure out what's going on here. Could I get some help? I'm noticing Ruth doesn't seem to like what I'm doing, and I thought I was doing it in a way that was good. So could you help me understand what's going on with Ruth so we can do this differently?
Yeah, and one of the things that I think we have to, and I think one of the things that has made Vista special, and it's one of the reasons I've been there for 21 years, is that you meet people where they are, whether they're elders, caregivers, families, our community partners, Memory Care Alliance that, hooked Laura, made Laurie, Henry, and I meet each other. But your community partners, your volunteers, your English doesn't make the care that you give. It doesn't make the soul of the work that you give. And the narrative out there, I mean, if you ask for good, bad, and ugly, ugly for me is someone who's worked in residential care of some form or fashion for like 32 years at this point. And that includes the jails, down developmental disabilities, halfway houses, rehab centers, and Vista. It makes me crazy to keep hearing what you see on the news is, the place in Jersey or Pennsylvania that had dead bodies, or the place in Florida that's not even letting families look at each other, or letting them see their loved one. What you don't hear is, Blanca and Michael down in Las Cruces cooking beautiful food for families, sitting up a love room that, has a microphone on either side and plants and pictures and great food and a drink and a mister and, just
and
beautiful, beautiful stuff.
So it's possible. It's very possible. The problem is it doesn't consistently happen. And there is a difference between what is possible and what sometimes gets done. And what we're doing is look what's possible.
But I think, part of I think what happens, the reason that it doesn't consistently happen is we're feeding the monsters instead of the angels. We're showing the folks who are screwing up not the folks who are committed and passionate and doing the right thing.
And so that's how, yeah. And so I think this is how Mary Daniels and that story got lifted. And now we say,
Yeah.
okay, so let's have more of this and less of that. Let's start looking at the places where they never actually kept people isolated. And let's look at that and see what happened there. And even if they did, let's open those windows too.
Or let's look at the places that are talking to their states and
Yeah.
saying,
Let's,
this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, we're trying our best.
Yeah.
PPE is difficult to get. Let's find a place where we can all work together and help each other.
right. And exactly. And I think, Ruth, you're right on with why we're doing what we're doing. So I want to move over to Mary, because I do want to hear Mary, because I know, Mary, you had some things that haven't been so great, the challenge, because you wanted to talk about the challenge a little bit before. And I held you up and said, let's talk about the good stuff, which is sort of what Ruth is saying. Well, you know, we want to talk about the good stuff and not just the stuff that isn't so great. So tell us about the challenge, though, the challenges that you see, just for a few minutes here. Share out what you're thinking of some of the challenges.
Well, some of the challenges is retention. Ruth was talking about that. Daphne touched on it, how that match doesn't work sometimes. You hope that it sticks. It's got to be like Velcro, and it doesn't. And it's a letdown when it is, when it doesn't, stick. I had someone come in. She was to be with me. We gowned up, PPE. This is a total COVID facility. Each resident, and it's memory care. So you've got that added challenge there.
Right.
We PPE'd up, told her, let's use the preventive measures. She's a seasoned CNA. She took one look at the hall, said, I got to get something out of my car. Okay, I'll meet you back at the nurse's station. Boom, she was gone.
Wow.
I felt defeated.
Wow,
It's
she
like,
was terrified.
Why do
Wow.
some stick and some don't?
Wow, so that visual of seeing that hallway, she thought she had a handle on it until her primitive brain went,
Exactly. And
I am walking into hell, and I am not going into hell. I mean, in her mind. For you, it's just, I'm going into a place where they need angels. I'm going into a place where they need help. And I have the ability to help, so I'm going. And you thought you had a partner, and you're like, whoa. But she was so frightened, she couldn't even tell you the truth. She said, I'm going to get something out of the car, because her brain said, I'm not a coward. And yet when she stepped away, she realized, I can breathe here. And you had to let go of that sense of defeat, which was really hard moving forward. So how was your energy and brain? What emotions were you feeling there? Because they had to have been powerful in that moment when you realized she was not coming back.
My emotion was high when that happened, but I kind of went into a shift in my mode. It's like, okay, gone. Let's not focus on that. What we need to do is make sure that we continue with our preventive measures. We continue to keep our residents safe and protected. Seth talks about that. It is a big deal for the safety and protection, especially in this pandemic. They do not understand.
Yeah, so now you
on.
make me wonder, though, because you're one person down and you were already, and that gowning and gloving and PPEing and all that stuff takes time. And so now you're walking into this situation, a person down. So what did everybody have to do to take up the slack? Because there's no way that was an extra person that you were bringing along for the fluff.
We actually, I've been very lucky with this agency that I'm with now. I have been blessed with a good group of nurses, a good core group of CNAs. We had each other's back, as the kids say these days. If you needed something, we were there. You tag team. So-and-so down the hall is having a really bad time of it. They're combative. I need an extra pair of hands. Okay, let me do this and I'll meet you at the room. We tag team, making sure those lines, we talked about the lines of communications being open. Let someone know if you're feeling overwhelmed. They're going to be there for you, and reciprocate that to them. Be there for them when they need it. because as CNAs, we tend to internalize.
Yeah.
And then that comes out sometimes as frustration. And worse, even worse, it comes out as maybe an abuse. So we want to make sure we don't internalize. We want to keep that communication open, helping each other. We came together as a as a core group.
As a core group. So
Yeah.
in those days, I mean, in that day at least, were there still connections made with families for those people who were in that COVID positive situation? Or did that get, I mean, and again, I don't want to sit in judgment. I mean, you were doing the best you could. Were you still able to, as a team, bring the family in? Or was that one sort of like, as much as we want to, we just can't because there's only so much we can do? And I think that's real. I'm just trying to find out what happened that day.
Right. Well, we're not able, this facility does not allow the visitors to come in. We are
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't think visitors would be in, but I'm wondering about those communications, those connections.
Right. So we kept the lines of communication open with the families. They are kept in contact with, told how their loved one is going, how the day went, who their care provider was.
On a daily basis, people were hearing on a daily basis how people were doing?
Right, exactly.
Okay. So again, I want to lift up places where people are hearing on a daily basis what's going on, because I think one of the hardest things is to be on the outside and hear nothing, and to know how dangerous COVID is, and to hear nothing day after day, no phone calls returned, no messages, no visuals of how it's going, no verbal interaction. And unfortunately, that's what happens. And when that starts happening, this is where distrust builds, because I don't know, not knowing, it starts to build distrust. So what you guys did, even in all that, was you figured out how to have that be something that was valued enough to make sure it happened.
We've implemented the Facebook too, the FaceTiming. The families can do that to keep in contact with their loved ones. That was
part of your job. That wasn't sort of a nice add-on. It was just what you did as part of what you did. Okay.
And let me tell you too, I saw something and it blew me away. Some of the babies, when they're born, they have those the neonatal units where the parents can put their hands through and touch the babies. I saw this where they made one wall, and the parents, children, grandparents, whoever, could be on the outside and reach in and actually grab and hug their loved one who is on isolation with COVID. It blew me away.
Now that's a commitment. I mean, that's a commitment to how to have that happen. So that's
to see a facility do that. It did. It just blew me out of the water.
Because what that says is they see their people as whole people, not just patients to be cared for. This is a whole person who has need of touch and has need of comfort, along with the other aspects of care, and recognizing that.
Well, Miss Teepa, I need to let you know, I need to go, so I apologize, but thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you for taking time and being with Mary. Thank you so much for what you do each day. Thanks for who you are, and thanks for the difference you're making in people's lives. So thank you, Mary.
Thank you, my friend. You have a good one and be blessed.
You too.
Bye-bye, all.
Bye-bye, all. So Seth or Daphne, would you like to bring anything to the table about challenges that you've noticed and what you're thinking about how to help with the challenges?
For me, the main challenges that I've noticed, and it's not so much pandemic related, it's just incentive related. We're doing the same thing over and over. It's almost like the pandemic has really taught us nothing about caring for people, but also how to take care of the workers. Like you talk about families having caregiver burnout, but in the midst of this, the caregivers are doing the same thing they were doing before. They're working these double shifts. They're working 12 hours. They're working short-staffed. And now in the midst of this, when people are like, they're getting sick because you're burning them out, or they're afraid to come in because someone coughs or just has a temperature and they can't distinguish between, what's just a regular temperature and what could be a COVID symptom. They're exhausted. And then anything they're asked, they're going to get frustrated. But then you're also not paying them, and you're not bringing in people. That's part of the other reason that people don't want to do the work, is because most companies would rather operate short-staffed than operate with more staff and less, they operate short, but they don't want to do CNA to patient ratio should be less.
Right.
It's unfathomable.
Yeah. So do you think that most companies that you've come across, unlike Ruth's company, I mean, because I think Ruth's company, we've got to lay it out there. It's a beautiful exception.
She does. She has the map for it. I mean, yeah, she's doing it the right way.
We've always known that there were maps. People just don't like looking at maps. They want to basically get somewhere by magic. They think you get somewhere by magic. You don't get somewhere by magic. You get somewhere by hard work and choices you make along a map and a road. So with what you're seeing, I absolutely agree with you that people are asked to do more with less, and we know that we're breaking their immune systems down. Right. We are choosing courses of travel that will reduce their immune responses and put them in a more vulnerable situation, physiologically and physically, but emotionally. And so how do we start to deal with this? We weren't dealing with it well before the pandemic. You're absolutely right. This was an issue before the pandemic, that people who are doing this really hard work were not receiving compensation for the really hard work. And then we were bringing in people who were not well suited to the work, telling them they were equivalent with almost no training.
Right.
And putting them in situations where they weren't going to be successful. I mean, we have a long history of that. And Peg and I could share stories of wonderful people and people that from the very beginning was like, ooh, not a good match.
Right.
So what kind of ideas do you have to take us from where we are? The pandemic has provided this window, which is an opportunity to raise things up differently than we were raising them before, because before it was just this one little section. This, people are noticing it's too much with too little for too many.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
What do you think?
I think part of the empowerment part of things is absolutely accepting the fact that CNAs have a right and a choice to say, I have too many patients and I can't do it, but having this conversation with the families, because the thing is, families entrust us to care for them, but what they don't get is they don't get the reality. They get the chandelier. They get the nice to knows, but not the need to know. So they can sometimes, I don't want to say they're demanding, because they can only ask for what they've been told. So if you've been told this,
how do we do that with families? We put out this front. This is what we'll do. We'll make everything look fine when you come. I mean, and that is, I mean, we'll make the place look nice. We'll make people look good. But instead of saying, this is the hard part about dementia, and we're going to help on some of the hard things, we need some training on how to do that so we don't cause drama and trauma ourselves and to ourselves. But at the same time, you need to know that things aren't super fine, and mom doesn't look fantastic without all of us working together for mom to look and feel fantastic. And mom is changing. And how do we help that narrative that this is what we'll do? We'll take all of this away from you and you will see the person that you can be happy with. Do you think, I mean, that to me is the disservice we do to people living with dementia, their families and ourselves when we do that.
Well, because the thing with families is we never teach them and we never talk to them about, when you lead a life, it's like a book. You can't read the same chapter over and over and over because you won't continue to read the book. At some point, there has to be an end to this chapter. It's got to change. There's got to be some peaks. There's going to be some valleys, but we have to be willing to talk to them honestly and accept the emotion they're going to get from it and help them walk them through this process. And instead of just, okay, get mom dressed on her good days and we over the phone tell them, well, she's not having a good day today, so it's not a good day to see her. No, come see her on the days that aren't good.
It may change the day.
Right, because exactly, that may change the total outcome.
I could use your help. I mean,
because she might be in a moment.
Yeah. So the idea, so I'm curious because, Mary Daniel, we talk about this essential caregiver family role. I truly believe, because I think some of you have been those people, that family can have an essential role in care. Now, not all families choose to become an essential care member. That's a choice that people make, but we shouldn't eliminate people by virtue of relationship. I think if we could figure out how to build a team that's wider and broader, you bring expertise that I don't have, but I have expertise that can help. My mom has expertise that neither of us have because she's lived her whole life as she is, and she is who she is. And so the two of us are got a plan together of how to support her in continuing the next chapter of her life. How do we become a team? And that's really what this whole thing is really about for us. Is what do we need to do to help us get to this place of relationship, of commitment to one another, the good, the bad, the ugly. We work it through, we figure it out, we frustrate one another sometimes, and then we get over it and say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, I shouldn't have done that. That was me being mad. How can we get back to a relationship that makes sense for us?
Well, I think one of the things that, we fail to realize is everybody plans these care plan meetings and everything, but we forget to include the most important part of the care plan team, the CNA. This is the person, it's not even the nurse. As a nurse, I will tell you, if it wasn't for a CNA, I would never be a nurse. If we bring them into the meeting and ask them, how are they doing and what are they doing, and allow them to chart and I'm not saying chart, things that are absolutely insane, but chart the things that are the reality and take that charting as this is true picture of who they are. Nurses, we walk in and it's a few minutes, you're walking in, you're giving meds and you're out the door. The CNA knows if there's a decline, how they're moving, if they need more assistance, but we have a care plan meeting with the family, the nurse, maybe a physician, and MDS coordinator, that this is all about the money part of it, the business angle. We're not talking about the person.
Yeah.
We're talking about what the resume looks like on paper, but never really, let's get to the heart of the matter, the person.
Because now we have this triad of partners where we have these various humans that are in charge of things, but we have these two people who are spending a lot of time together. And sometimes it's a family member and sometimes it's a staff member, because the reality is before COVID, let's not kid ourselves. These were family members were sometimes doing some CNA type jobs without training, often without that background, but they love and they were part of somebody's life. So they're doing it from a history of time with someone. Some of us were actually trained before we got into the role of care provider. Mm-hmm. And some of us weren't, but we were that. But now we have a new provider who comes at this with a different skill set and a different background. But if I agree with you, if we don't build a team that's a true team, we're truly missing the boat. Mm-hmm. And I think figuring out why does it have to be an either or? Why can't it be us coming together and building us into something that is meant to be, which is community? It's meant to be a community, and we've got to really respect one another and lift one another up when we're really having a hard time. So I'm going to thank Daphne, because we're with you. And the idea of people being able to say that's too many people. What you're asking is the impossible. How do I do this in a way, that does not give care the best I can give, but I can't do this day after day, because then I start condoning what we're doing. What's that balance? How do I do this without putting my own well-being at jeopardy? Without leaving people uncared for? How do I do this? And I think that's the dilemma we put too many frontline staff in, which is, so what, you don't show up either? It's like, well, that's not what I want. I want people to own this is too much for too few, for too many. That's what I want people to recognize. And I want us to realize that family members could be part of this, but that shouldn't be a substitute for enough people. That should be what makes this whole. So We're getting close on time. We're getting real close. Seth, I want to give you an opportunity because you haven't had a chance for a bit and you probably have stuff to say. So do you have some things you would like to share out sort of as we're sort of wrapping up the roundtable?
Just very quickly, Teepa, I've got a long day ahead of moving. I've got to motivate a 16-year-old girl and a 14-year-old boy to help pack and load boxes.
Letting her show up on Facebook as minimal as this was, that was a bump, I guess, to get her going, huh?
As more than half of American youth are hooked on Starbucks and Dunkin' right now. She's getting in the car, probably driving to spend $5 on a stinking coffee. I'm not going to go off on a tangent, but anyway, it's this whole dynamic of the staffing piece of these facilities with these primarily CNAs. You're talking about a humongous elephant in the room. We can't even touch that issue here on the staffing piece because we would be into this for a long, long time. Ultimately, what drives everybody, what drives our country? It's the green stuff. So it's all tied into that, unfortunately. And the important stuff, like the care, the touch, the connection, the CNA sitting in on the family meeting, like Daphne said, it doesn't happen.
And yet Ruth is, I know where Ruth is going to say, but it can. And that's the challenge.
No, it can happen. And I believe that's the whole premise behind CNAs only is something's going to change, whether it's in a year, whether it's in 5 years, in terms of the CNA, their role, their recognition, their respect, their empowerment. It's got to change. It cannot stay like it is now because they're the foundation. This piece is going to crumble.
Yeah.
This whole model is going to crumble if these
don't
people
start listening.
If something doesn't change with them.
It's institutional bias. It's just an institutional bias that needs to be addressed.
It can happen, Ruth. It can happen, but you got to get companies that are traded publicly on the stock exchange to buy into Ruth's model or meet in the middle or somewhere in there.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. But anyway,
I'll give you a couple numbers that might change that. Greenhouse model.
Yeah.
An alternative greenhouse, 95% COVID free.
Yeah.
21 years at Vista with an occupancy of past 95%.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
You can do well financially by doing good. You can also do well by having enough caregivers to do the job.
Right.
And respecting those caregivers and sharing that with family in a way that makes sense.
It's got to be a piece of it. But anyway, thanks for having me, Teepa. I got to run.
Welcome.
We got to start moving.
Go for it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of the conversation.
Everybody take care.
You too. Absolutely. So what we're going to do now, as much as I'd like to do something different, is we're going to just double check finally if Corey has any really burning questions, because we just have a few minutes. This was our second roundtable. And I think the takeaways, CNAs and our residential care personnel are in a really challenging position right now. Way too many folks aren't getting the support they need to do the support we ask. Part of it is numbers, but part of it is simply respect. Part of it is owning that we are going to have to come together to make this change. There is not this desire for good, hardworking, believing personnel to not want family involvement. We want and need families to engage, but how we do this, coming out of where we've been, we've got to recognize that risk of COVID and the risk of isolation, and we've got to find a balance. And that's where some places are doing it in different ways. We have some of our communities, Halekaluke out in Hawaii, they don't have contact, but boy, do they have family connections. And Ruth's group is doing that. And even in that COVID community, Ruth's group was figuring out how to do so. And we figure things out when we decide we're going to figure things out. We don't figure things out when we think we already know the answer. But the answer is we don't know the answer, but we've got to get other people to pay attention. We have a question and we have a concern. And more of what is happening at Ruth's facility at Halle Kaluke and at other places should be going on in other places where people living with dementia are. We've got to break the first barriers, which is bring people out of their rooms. They should never been put in their rooms. And then we've got to figure out from there how we bring people together. But we've got to get enough care staff present and supported so they can do what needs to be done with care and with knowledge and with skill. So thank you guys so much for being part of this conversation in this roundtable. Thank you for coming together and being willing to share. And I'm sorry we lost Peg early on, but I know she's listening, but I also know she can't.
Peg's here.
Oh, well, Peg.
Wait a minute, wait. Here, look. Here, where am I? There I am.
Well, we're going to have another conversation, Peg, because we've run out of time, but
I know I'm burning over here. I got so much to say.
Well, you know what? You and I'll have a conversation on another morning if you're up for it.
Oh, always, T. Always.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Peg.
Okay.
Thank you, every single one of you. Thank everybody on Facebook.
Love you all. Bye.
Thanks, team.
Thank you.
And thanks, Daphne and Ruth, for being part of our world. Thanks for stepping up and stepping forward.
Hey folks, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to help us spread Teepa's positive approach message around the world. And don't forget to click the bell to get notified when new videos are posted.